This time of year, you hear lots of Christmas music. You hear it on the radio, when you're shopping in stores, all over the place. And one of the songs that you sometimes hear this time of year goes sort of like this. It's the most wonderful time of the year. You might have heard that song before. It sounds sort of like that. And for many of us, however, when we hear that song, what goes through our thoughts is, well, it doesn't feel so wonderful, really. We're dealing with the coronavirus, illness and death of our friends and family members, job layoffs, lack of money, stress, the pain of separation. There's a lot of things going on right now in our world that are not very wonderful. However, this is the third Sunday of Advent, and this Sunday in the Catholic calendar is called Gaudete Sunday. That name comes from the Latin entrance antiphon from the Mass today, which says, "Rejoice in the Lord always." Again, I say, rejoice. The word gaudete in Latin literally means rejoice, y'all. And so, the readings and the prayers in the Mass talk about joy. The first reading says, "I rejoice heartily in the Lord. In my God is the joy of my soul." And our responsorial psalm says, "My spirit rejoices in God my Savior." Because this is Gaudete Sunday, we light the rose-colored candle on the Advent wreath today and throughout the rest of this week, because the color rose is a symbol of joy. Now, let's think about the color rose. It helps us to make sense out of the not-so-wonderful realities of Christmas in the year 2020. Think about the flower, the rose. It has its beautiful side, which is the pretty flower and the sweet smell, but the rose also has its painful side with the sharp thorns. And the point of Christmas is not that everything is perfect in our world. The point of Christmas is that love comes to dwell in an imperfect world. When you think about what Christian joy is really all about, you see that there's no contradiction between having joy and having struggles. For the Christian, it makes perfect sense. In the second reading of the Mass today, from the first letter of Paul to the Thessalonians, St. Paul says, "Rejoice always. Pray without ceasing. In all circumstances, give thanks." Now, think about the life of St. Paul. Paul suffered through all kinds of difficult circumstances. You could make a long list of them: prison, shipwreck, beatings, stonings, floating adrift at sea, robbery, attacks, hunger, thirst, sleepless nights, cold, anxiety about the churches that he served, rejection by others, and in the end, he got his head chopped off. And this is the same guy who says, "Rejoice always, in all circumstances, give thanks." He understood the Christian perspective on joy. The nature of Christian joy is like this. Our joy is realistic. It's not naive. To be joyful, we don't deny the pain in life. True Christian joy can be experienced even in the midst of suffering. Think about the classic stories of the martyrs in the early centuries of the church. As they were going to be executed, they were rejoicing. That can only happen with a Christian mentality. We could be sick, we could be running out of money, we could be facing struggles at work, but we have a deep current of joy that runs underneath the surface of our life. And the best image for me that helps to illustrate how a Christian can be going through tough times in the moment, but still have a deep underlying sense of joy is to look at this image, the image of the Gulf Stream in the Atlantic Ocean. To me, it makes perfect sense. You go out onto the Atlantic Ocean, the North Atlantic, and on the surface of that ocean, you're going to see that the wind and the storms toss the water this way and that. You'll see the water going this way, that way, whichever way the wind or storms happen to be pushing it in that moment. However, deep underneath, there's the constant, steady current of the Gulf Stream that's always flowing in the same direction year after year, year-round. And so, those waves on the surface that pass this way and that, flopping this way and that in the wind and in the storms, they can symbolize our passing emotions. Because emotions come and go depending on the circumstances that we're dealing with that day. But deep underneath, in a Christian heart, the current is constant and steady. That's where Christian joy is located, at a deeper level. That image makes sense to me as to where we Christians find our joy. A bitter person looks at the negative parts of life only, and that person is never at peace. A naive person looks only at the positive parts of life, and that person never grows up. But a Christian person looks at all parts of life, both the happy and the sad parts, the fun stuff and the painful stuff. And the Christian person digs down deep to find the source of joy. That's why St. John Paul II said this about joy. He said, an unmistakable characteristic of Christian joy is that it can coexist with suffering because it is totally based on love. And you know, one of our classic Advent songs is, O come, Emmanuel. Emmanuel is a title of Jesus Christ. The word Emmanuel in Hebrew literally means God with us. So as you prepare for Christmas this year, in this pandemic year of 2020, with all of its joys and pains, rejoice in the fact that out of love, God chooses to humble himself and come down from the infinite bliss of heaven in order to be with us in the midst of the struggles and the pain of our human condition. God chooses to come near. He's right there with you. Whether you're happy or sad, whether you're surrounded by others or in COVID isolation, whether you are well or unwell. In all the brokenness and the sloppiness of life, God is near to us, always loving us. And God is the source of our joy.